Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for being with us for our 5 Questions with series. Today, I have the pleasure to introduce the audience to Richard Chapman. Of course, the audience doesn't need any introduction for Richard. He's been with the community since the very beginning, and even before the beginning. And he's been with HPCC Systems and LexisNexis Risk Solutions for a very long time, for over 2 decades, and in technology for so long that I can't even say the number of years. He was the brain, or one of the most important brains behind the original design of Thor and ROXIE and every other component in HPCC. And he has been the driving force for most of the innovation and research that came up into the HPCC Systems platform. And of course, he's always been an advocate of open source and also driving our initiatives in the open source world above and beyond what HPCC has done so far. So, Richard, thank you very much for being with us today. And I'd like to ask you a few questions, if you are okay.
Sure. Shoot.
So, Richard, the first question I had prepared was that it was something about the starting point of HPCC, and it was what you were hoping to achieve with the platform in the beginning. But let me be a little bit more direct and perhaps a little bit less formal. So, what's your first memory about Thor? How did Thor come up to be?
How did Thor come into existence? Thor came into existence in order to prepare data for a previous incarnation of our supercomputing platform known as HOLY. HOLY was an in-memory system that needed data sorted and child tables sorted for it, and we didn't have any way of sorting the large volumes of data that were needed for HOLY. It was too large and too slow to sort on the existing hardware of the time, so we had to create Thor in order to feed data into HOLY. Now, of course, Thor tends to be used to feed data into ROXIE, but it's the same sort of idea.
So, that's very interesting. So, when was HOLY designed then?
HOLY was designed around the year 2000. Originally designed by 2 former employees known as Hank and Oli, and the name of it was a contraction of their names.
Oh, very interesting. And so, this is an in-memory distributed platform designed and implemented back in year 2000. That sounds quite quite early for almost for every other distributed memory in-memory platform that I know about. So that's very cool. So you're saying HOLY came up, and then we needed to build data for HOLY. So Thor came up to be. Was Thor originally and was HOLY also originally designed to run ECL, or was there something else?
Before HOLY ran ECL, it ran a version of SQL. So ECL came slightly after HOLY. Thor, I think, ran ECL from the beginning.
Oh, very good. That's good. So for just to have a little bit of an idea and some contrast. So if you were to compare what HPCC Systems has today versus what was designed in that original time, and by the way, ROXIE came up a little bit later, right? So how would you compare? What are the biggest differences you had that the platform has and you have in your mind between now and back in the early day?
That's an interesting question. I mean, to a large extent, the similarities are more striking than the differences. That the sort of core philosophy of using a domain-specific language, which is record-oriented, which is attribute-oriented, and which is functional and distributed over large quantities of relatively cheap hardware is exactly the design philosophy that we had 20 years ago. The ECL language hasn't changed enormously. It's been extended, obviously. The biggest difference is, I suppose, that have come in over the years would be, firstly, when we went open source, we decoupled the ECL source control system from the ECL compiler. Secondly, we've added a lot of connectivity to third-party or external systems, external languages like Java, Python, MySQL, etc., which has been actually very enabling in terms of extending the roles that ECL can do. Those would probably be my biggest highlights. I suppose in the early days there was no such thing as ECL Watch either, so there was you were a little bit blind in terms of knowing what the system was doing. You had to fire off your query and hope that it was working and get the results out at the end of it. So ECL Watch grew out of a need to have a little bit more information than that.
And do you recall any significant changes in the ECL language itself from the early days to today? Were there any breakthrough changes that weren't just a little enhancement on the language?
Well, the embed statement was fairly breakthrough, as I mentioned. We have added, the decoupling of the language from the version control. It required us to add things like modules and libraries. But it stayed fairly true to its roots, I think.
Very good, very good. So, and just let's make this bold. So, if you were to talk about one feature that you think was the most important feature that got introduced after, I don't know, the first few days or the first few years of the platform, what would you say that feature is? Think the last 10 years or whatever.
Well, if you're talking since the early days, I'd probably say ROXIE.
Very good. Okay, that sounds very significant. And a second feature?
A second feature. I'm trying to think. I should have read these questions before I came on, shouldn't I? Child queries, I suppose, in Thor is pretty significant.
Oh yeah, that is, yes.
Indexes is pretty significant. I mean, in the early days, there was no, ECL didn't support indexes. It didn't support child queries at all. So those are both new.
Absolutely. So, well, it makes sense because,
but they are very significant.
Yeah, but it makes sense because in the early days you said that Holly was the target, and Holly as an in-memory database wouldn't need much in terms of indices, right?
Correct. Yes, we did have a primitive form of index in Holly, which was a bitmap index that we used to indicate the presence or otherwise of a value, but it's nothing like the indexes we have today.
I see. So, and that just, I don't think I really asked this to you today. Why did we drop Holly? So, isn't there a place for Holly today, or do you think that what we have really supersedes anything that Holly could do?
In theory, almost everything that Holly can do, you can do today with ROXIE. There are still occasions when we think, oh, it's a shame that we don't have Holly around because it would be perfect for this solution. But the main problem with it, I think, was in effect every query, because there were no indexes, every query had to read every value, every row in memory to work out whether it was going to process it or not. And that limited the throughput. So it was very good at ad hoc, complicated queries with a small number of users, but not so good at pre-designed complicated queries with a large number of users, which is where ROXIE tends to be useful. And that's really what led the migration from wholly to ROXIE.
Very good point. Yeah, I understand now. So, Richard, if you were to tell someone about your favorite use case for HPCC, what would that use case be? What is the textbook use case that you would say, this is HPCC?
Well, there's a few that are textbook use cases that for the LexisNexis data combined with HPCC, but whether they're appropriate for this audience, I'm not sure. I mean, the Troy Graves search springs to mind, for example. This was trying to identify an individual from information about completely unrelated events and correlating those events to where a particular person had been at the time of those events, and in the end catching a rather nasty individual. But I don't know whether that's the sort of thing you're after.
No, yeah, I don't remember much about that case, but I think it was a serial killer, right, or something like that, or serial rapist or something.
He was a serial rapist, yes. I mean, we were also involved in, if you remember, the Beltway sniper a few years ago.
Yes, yeah.
Similar sort of thing, trying to find a needle in a haystack from very limited information, and certainly we did locate. Or we did play our part in locating the individual.
Yes, yeah. The big boil in the ocean and needle in a haystack type of problems are those are my favorite too. Yeah. So let's move on a little bit, and let's move just for a moment away from the platform itself, and let's talk about you as a technologist. And you're an experienced technologist. You've been in technology for many decades and leading very complex projects and very involved technology teams. So what would be your advice for someone that is trying to enter technology? Some young technologist or someone in school trying to see if technology would be their career and what they should do to truly succeed in technology.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say is more appropriate for someone who's already chosen technology as a career rather than someone who's thinking about it, but maybe I'll come back to that. Someone who's thinking about it, I guess, I mean, from my point of view, you know whether it's something you're interested in. It either comes naturally or it doesn't. And if it comes naturally and you're going to be, a natural for the career path that I've chosen, it'll be blindingly obvious. You'll be spending all your time hacking together solutions on computers. You'll already have your Stack Overflow account and your GitHub account and so on. But
very good. So you are saying if you already have a passion, nobody needs to tell you what to do. You already know because it's inside you, right?
That's pretty much what I was saying, yes.
Yes, yeah. That's clever. Yes, it is true. Very good. So just to close this, and let's take a longer view. Let's see the future. So I know HPCC has been around for 2 decades now, almost, and we hope that it will be around for 2 decades more or more. So how do you see the platform? How do you see HPCC? How do you see, the community capabilities, the future roadmap? But we're not talking about roadmap for the 7.4 version or for the 8.0 version. We are talking about roadmap in the long run. How do you see HPCC in 10 years from now?
Okay, a good question. I think the it will certainly still be very recognizable, for someone who's familiar with the system of today. So it'll be a process of evolution rather than revolution between now and then. I think I would expect to see rather more in the way of connectivity to third parties. I would expect to see the parallel processing be even more significant in terms of, rather than just being across multiple machines, we'll be making sure that we make use of the thousands of cores that you have on a single machine. In even a couple of years' time, I suspect that will be true. I think the sort of user interface to HPCC will become slicker and slicker, so it'll be easier to use. But the basic power and the basic language and the data is only going to get bigger. Most things will stay the same, only more so, I think.
That is a good answer, very good answer. Well, Richard, thank you very much for doing this. I really, really enjoyed talking to you today, and I hope our audience also enjoys listening to this later on. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for hanging up with us today. Thank you.
You're very welcome.